School of Theater and Dance. We kindly ask that you turn off all electronic devices, including cell phones, as they can interfere with our sound system. For the courtesy of your fellow audience members, we ask that you refrain from texting during the performance. Photography and video recording is strictly prohibited. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Yeah, baby, I got accepted.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, baby. No more picture runs for me. Did you go to UF? What? No, I didn't apply to the university. Look. See, you couldn't come on here when I graduated high school.
We couldn't apply to UF.
No.
You didn't go here. And we had what's the man's name? I can't recall his name. He come here and try to go to school.
Which one?
The law school.
Oh, Virgil Hawkins.
Yeah. That was the first student integration of the University of Florida.
Yeah.
And I didn't never think I'd be able to take a class at the University of Florida, and finally I did. For a long time, we couldn't go.
No.
And even for a long time, a few people took a few classes, and that was it for several years. You could go out and take a few classes, but you couldn't live on campus. You could live in those university housing for a long time.
Why do you think you could never go to the university?
Well, because it was all white. And I happened to go to the University of Florida. It was when Santa Fe first opened and I wanted to be a nurse. But I got married and didn't go to nursing school because if you wanted to go to school here, you had to try to go to Florida Memorial or you go to Florida A&M or to the Jacksonville.
That's right.
So there was no college for black people to go to.
No, not in the dead yet.
I didn't care too much for the university because simple reason, prejudice towards us, so I didn't want to work, I didn't want to go. Now, I don't care about it today. I don't care that much. I don't look for them. My children, my son, he graduated from the University of Florida. My nephew, Randall, he graduated from the University of Florida. I've got two nieces, Tanya and Pam. They graduated from the University of Florida. And who else?
My nephew, my brother Henry's son, boy, ex-wife, she graduated from the University of Florida. So I got a lot of family that went to Florida, come out of Florida. And they going.
Are you going, B? Are you going?
And I say, never. Now I call them because I don't know what happened. I say, what happened to your Gators?
I don't want to hear.
They hang up on me.
Now you ain't got to call and rub it in on us.
When you was talking, nobody could talk then. Y'all rubbed it in when I came around. So, what's going on with you and your Gators? My youngest son, he retired from the Navy. He lives up in Milton, Florida, out of Cocoa. Okay, yeah. Pensacola. He come and he's a Gator fan, so I call him.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I know what you're calling.
You gonna listen to this here? What is going on with you and your Gators?
I know it. I know it. I don't want to hear it. I don't feel good in my head.
If you don't listen, it's gonna be worse. I say I'm gonna let you go. I just want to let you know. I'm gonna call you back tomorrow after church. You better answer that phone. Yeah.
I don't come into this interview pretending I don't have humble beginnings because my beginnings are very humble. I think it prepared me for coming to the University of Florida. And I think one of the things I can say about my book is that freedom or equality or the privilege of integration didn't come without a tremendous price. Suwannee County was known for lynching me. As a matter of fact, my father was the NAACP president for several years, and I remember before he became president, the current president's home was bombed. The front porch, that is. They burned the cross and they threw stuff in the yard. And so he left. He and his family, and they went to Fort Lauderdale.
And shortly after that, my father became president of the NAACP. And so I'm just grateful that we lived through all of this because really and truly we could have been targets as well.
Oh, yeah.
So growing up in Suwannee County, we went to church on Sundays, we went to school 5 days a week. And when we got home from school, we got undressed and we went into the fields.
My grandfather, if it was raining, he would meet us out in the wagon for us to have a coat to go over us, where we wouldn't get sick. Yes, and we had to walk. We'd walk straight down the railroad until one girl, and I can't remember her name, was killed down there. Somebody killed her.
What happened?
Had stopped at a store to get her sisters some washing powder to wash with, because they lived out in the country, near our church, and would go out there in their Christmas time practice.
I can't wait for y'all today because I need to go take care of my sister. I need some washing powder, so I'm going on.
But nobody figured nothing would happen, so we thought she'd gone on, because I wasn't going, because Mama said I had something else to do.
You'll just have to miss.
But another lady, she was behind her. Now, she said she seen Pearlie. Her name was Pearline. You know the railroad? It's got a curve in it. And after she turned the curve, she didn't see her. Oh, and after she turned the curve and got around the curve, she looked down the road and said she didn't see her.
Well, Miss Polly, why didn't you tell somebody?
I thought that she went up. There was a guy that lived up there in the Gulf Lane. I thought that she was up there maybe talking to Fred or something.
That doesn't make sense. And you missing the girl ahead of you and then telling her sister and them?
We always walk on. Every one of us would walk on one side of the railroad. We never walked on that other side when we going to London. But had they walked on the other side, they would have found this girl's books, laying where she laid them, and they going down the hill slantways. But they didn't find that until the next day. The man that take care of the pool, the waterworks, he said he heard a gun shoot twice, about 2 o'clock in the morning. So police finally, when someone of them walked on the other side, they found the books. And they went seeing where the tracks went down and said it was 2 men beside her, seeing her track and the 2 men track. And they found where they smoked the pipes and rolled the cigarettes and shot her. Done what they wanted to do to her and shot her.
Because she was by herself.
But the reason we moved to Gainesville, because when we got to the 8th grade, it wasn't a high school for black people in Union County. So when you finished school, first they had a little 1-room schoolhouse. Then they built another room and made it a 2-room schoolhouse. But they still didn't have a high school. We had to walk past the high school, and we had to walk the railroad, because if you tried to walk the road, when the school bus would go by, the kids would throw things at us, the black children. So we had to walk the railroad.
And how far was that walk?
Ooh, it was about from here to the mall where we had to walk to school from where we were living at that time, and we had to walk the railroad.
And you went to school every day?
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
And you said you grew up in a white neighborhood?
The reason we were in the white neighborhood is because my mama worked for some of the most prominent black people in Lake Buckland. Ooh, such as the Ryherds and the Mainers and the McGills. And so we had a little house that faced the railroad, and my mom, she cooked and washed. For years, she cooked and washed for the white people in Lake Buckland.
And how was it growing up in that white neighborhood? Were you ever able to go outside?
With me, I could go all over the place because Mama was working, and I would play with the white children up there. Ooh, in fact, Daddy built us a playhouse up in the oak tree in our yard, and the white children, some of them, found us and would be at our house all the time. So we got along pretty good because Daddy was a hard worker and Mama was a hard worker. And that's what it took to live back then. So we got along pretty good.
Now, could you ever go to their house?
Yeah, I could go there because Mama worked there.
Oh.
But the other black children couldn't go. So I was the only black child in there. I was a pickaninny. Ooh, it was me, Susan, and another girl. We played together almost inseparable at Mrs. Valley's. And I always now have a big bowl of fruit, because she always had a big bowl of fruit on the buffet. I got along good. I got pretty, you know, older. And we moved downside on Lake City Road when Daddy got into the CCC camp where people would walk where they needed to go. Ooh, and Mama had let people sleep on the porch. Because when they got real cold, she'd let them come in the house to the fireplace. Ooh, had it been like it is now, they probably done killed us all.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh, and she'd get up in the morning, and she'd make them some biscuits. Ooh, and she'd roll them up in a piece of brown paper. We didn't have bags and stuff like we do now. And she'd roll them up and give it to him while he going down the road. And for 7 years, someone would send her $100 bill in an envelope wrapped in a piece of brown paper. Now, we don't know today, but that was a lot of money. $100 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it was probably somebody she helped down the road. And when World War II come, she went back to doing hair. She was a beautician. And during that time, I come on to Gainesville to go to school. And my daddy worked at Camp Landing, my sisters, my mom's sisters and all. And we'd catch a truck and go to Camp Landing. In fact, when I started to run my age up, Daddy signed it and I worked 3 months at Camp Landing. From there, we moved on to Gainesville out on 8th Avenue. It was boundary at the time and it didn't come no further than the fire station. There was a railroad track there. When you got to the railroad track, if a little rain would come, water would settle down there because it was a turpentine camp. And on Saturday nights, we'd have movies in the old steel house, which is right along there now where the recreation center for the kids, out on 8th Avenue. Do you know where the fire station is on Waldo Road?
Yeah, I know where the fire station is.
At that time, it only went to where Duval Elementary School is. It was just some houses because it was turpentine quarters. There was turpentine, steel, and everything. And the commissary was right there where 15th Street runs down to 8th Avenue. And the first affordable houses for blacks was some little barracks they moved out on 18th from Camp Landing. Ooh, it got to be too populated out there, where it got to be quite a few children. So a child got sick and said it was some contaminated water. So they cut a canal through there. We wanted city water. And so we had to meet with the county commissioner because at that time we were outside the city limits. One of the county commissioners come out there and he said,
"Give them niggas some water."
And that's how we got our first spigot in about 30 or 40 days. They ran that spigot down there by those apartments. Ooh, and the first store out there was Hellman's Grocery Store. And my mama had a cafe out there. Reason she had to close that cafe down was because she wouldn't sell them liquor, moonshine. She wouldn't sell them liquor, moonshine because she was a Christian. So they kept on bothering her and she had to close that cafe down.
I remember back in the day when I was a little boy, I made friends with the black man who ran the steamroller for the city of Gainesville. Now, a steamroller was this enormous smoke duster thing with a huge flat wheel on the front end of it and 2 big ones in the back. And this guy could manipulate that thing. You see, the 2 wheels in the back, they were in direct line with the one in the front, so it all rolled over the same space. And you could roll and flatten the gray slab with that thing. Now, this man could operate it so carefully, so precisely, that you could put a dime down in the street, and he would drive right along by it and not displace it with this huge, powerful thing. And that was the steamroller man, John. John was his name. I hesitate to put on record what everyone else called him, but why not? It's what everyone else called him.
He was called Nigger John.
Now, he somehow managed to live with that when he was in the presence of other whites, I suppose. He could live with it. Now, how he was in his free time, I don't know, because I didn't know him that way. Well, I just knew him as his friend who he'd come by after he parked that thing in the city lot, and he happened to walk back on Arredondo Street because, Arredondo was the main highway, back and forth footpathway, car, bicycle, you name it, at that time of the town. Now, the Arredondo Street, or 5th Street pathway, was between the Seminary neighborhood, which was north of town, and the other one, which was south of town, which was called Porter's Quarters. Now, Porter's Quarters was a wonderful black neighborhood full of people that I didn't know. Well, I know people from the Seminary neighborhood because I was on this side of University. University Avenue acted as kind of a dividing line between the north and south here. Kind of a microcosm of the whole north-south issue, if you ask me, or any of my playmates at the time. But, John, Steamroller John, excuse me. Naturally, he'd go back in the ordinances, all the way to the southeast city power lot, park the steamroller, and then he'd walk all the way back to Seminary Street. Now, if I was available, I'd wait for him on the corner till he got there, and then when he did, I'd run over, say hello, we'd chatter most of the way. How was your day today? Where'd you flatten out things in this here ordinance? that sort of thing. We'd laugh and talk. And he always had this jacket on right over his shoulder. No matter how the weather was, he always had one. He was a tall man. Long, lean, gaunt. But he had such a kindly face to operate that powerful thing. And then we get to the end of the street, and he would disappear from sight. That was how I visited with my friends in Arredonda Street. I got to know them. I knew where they worked and their patterns so I could be out here to walk my block with them. They wouldn't let me cross the street, mind you. I'd have to run to one end and then bother them all the way to the other one. How many of them were glad when we got to that corner? I don't know, but if they were, they never showed it. There were many like that. Aunt Mary was this alone, ancient beggar woman who pushed a baby carriage. Now, we'd bring her some food to eat, and she'd sit in the crotch of this old oak tree. And the roots of that tree, they grew up so big and so high that they made this kind of throne of sorts, which I would sit in from time to time when I was playing games. But she'd sit in that crotch of that tree, and we'd bring her some food to eat. And that was just the kind of thing that went on before, you know. And not many white people did that. Well, they were either not going north or south. They were going east or west or something, or they had a car or something like that. I didn't see them. I didn't bother myself with their skin hues. It was my black friends. They were the adults in the community. I knew many of them. Very few by name, actually. I just kind of heard them get called their names by everybody else. But here's the reason I wanted to bring up John. Because it was absolutely important in my life. Now, one day, I heard an ambulance siren wailing away. When I could tell it was coming from the Oscar Thomas Funeral Home up on Main Street, but it wasn't going up Main Street like it usually did. It was getting closer. So it was coming west, right along Church Street, and then it stopped. Right at the corner of Arredonda Street and Church Street, just stopped in the middle of the road. And so I ran out to get a better look, and when I got there was John, lying in the middle of the sidewalk in a pool of his own blood. He'd been sitting on this big curved fenceway, this big stone fenceway right at the corner of the Whitstock house. He'd been sitting there, and some drunk had failed to make the corner. So, John was lying here in his pool of blood. At the moment, I'm trying to recollect whether it was his left or his right. I think it was his left foot that had been severed and was just kind of swaying there by his Achilles cord. Now, I saw this when they picked him up and put him on the stretcher, but that happened sometime later because, and this was the pivotal thing, the Oscar Thomas ambulance refused to pick him up and put him on the ambulance because he was black and had to wait.
Yeah, we can't take him. You're going to have to wait for the White and Jones ambulance to get here.
And that's what I heard. And there's my friend lying there. Something flooded through me that had never flooded through me before. Because when I saw that, and I saw it was just pure island, I mean, it was awful. And all I could do was sit there, witness it. John, in his agony, I don't know if he could feel anything. Just kind of laid there with his hands clasped, praying. They didn't try to pick him up. They didn't try to make him comfortable. They didn't do anything. And that was so horrible that I wanted to beat on these people. That was not my nature. I was not brought up to raise my fists and pound. So mentally, I was pounding on him somehow. And then finally, the White and Jones ambulance showed up. And he was very tenderly picked up. But when they picked him up, his foot, which was still in the shoe, I remember, was just kind of swinging there by his Achilles tendon. That picture is so indelible. And the color of that blood right there in front of that house, I can't pass it without thinking about it. You know the funny thing? That stone he was sitting on, it still pushed out of the way. Nobody pushed it back. I don't think anybody even noticed it except me. Now, whoever ran into him, they were so drunk mean, there was no malevolence there. It was just ignorance and stupidity and drunkenness, just wanton nonsense. But the acts of unkindness that day, they were not wanton. They were deliberate. They were of a mindset that I was saved from in that moment, and I never forgot it. Now, what my actions were after that were the actions of a little boy who was scared, confused, and whose memory of the whole thing would be eclipsed by other things, and who would revert to being the same little boy who from time to time pretended that he owned Sammy, and Sammy loved pretending that he was a slave. And then when Sammy wanted to be the master and I was a slave, we'd switch roles. We never whipped each other, but we always carried a stick. The master carried the stick. My entire understanding of what slavery was, that was it. But that was what I emerged from. And that right there, that was the moment where the emergence began. Now, if you can trace that in your own life, to where you have this colossal life change, then you're lucky. Now, John obviously was not very lucky at all. And I don't mean to sound crass saying this, but I'm glad something like that happened so early in my life. Because it was always an ambivalence from that point forward, you know? And of course, all my friends had to have this apocryphal. No, not apocryphal. This what? This crowning moment, this emergence of understanding on some kind of level. It's very powerful. What it is, it'll come to me in some time. It's not trivial. It's important.
Epiphany?
Yeah, epiphany. That's exactly the word. Thank you. It wasn't trivial. It was an epiphany. The lack of epiphanies in childhood, it just kind of went below the surface, you know. But it always came out when I needed it. At crucial points in my life, when a decision had to be made about things.
Well, you can talk about this place, this mill, this man. Burnham and Schwartz got as many black people as they could, and they built a big quarters over there. And in that quarter, they had guards. They had to do. And then they were doing so bad, they sent the federal government to send soldiers. And they sent them in a hurry.
Well, did it help any to have the soldiers?
Well, they were kind of like they were in Georgia. They were still mean, but they weren't killing as bad. But they really meant for you not to get an education. Now, they meant that. Every church, every place we tried to go to school, they burned down. We had the Mason building. Big, old, tall Mason building over there. Well, that's where everybody went to school then. Because the mill had come in here, and then he built the quarters, and all them lived in the quarters. But they had guards at the gate, but they soon got tired of that. But them soldiers came. United States Army.
Now they talk about Rosewood there near Chieflands, but nobody talking about Rosewood here. Rosewood here, that's Perry.
Does anybody know the names of these people that burned those churches or killed the people? Did everybody know who they were?
It wouldn't do no good. Liptons, and there were some Richardsons. Mama know all those names. I do remember the Liptons and the Tolls. Now, Bill Tolls was mean until the end. He was so mean until last I can remember he was doing something to somebody, and a boy stayed up and was looking at him. I don't know. I know he know what that boy was thinking. He was probably thinking,
when I get to be a man, I'm gonna get you.
and you know he shot that boy in his back and he died?
Do you remember that boy's name?
They didn't do anything about it until later on. It was taken to a paper called the Chicago Defender. You heard of it?
Yes, ma'am. I know the Chicago Defender.
All right. In that Chicago Defender got hold to the news, and they spread it like fire. And after that, they came in here, and they got this man. He was named Bill Tolls, and they got him. But they didn't do nothing to him. I'll tell you what they did. They broke him. Took all his money. But that wasn't enough punishment for killing a boy teenager.
Do you know his name?
Joseph. I think Joseph William. I know the first was named Joseph. Just shot him in the back. Just...
What you watching, son? What you gonna do about it?
Just be drunken and acting like a nut and shot that boy in his back and he died. But they never give him a prison term or anything like that. They did fine him. They fined him so much until he didn't have anything. He was broke. He went to his sister crying.
They took all my money.
I don't know what she told him. He was a broke man. He died broke. You know that little store you pass when you turn on the corner there?
Oh, yeah.
That's what all he built with all he had left. And then the blacks didn't go down there and buy much from him. But the whites would go because they was afraid of him. Lipton, Bill Tolls, and some Richardson somebody. I do remember the Liptons and the Tolls. Well, the white people were scared of Lipton. He was was out on 19 one night. For some reason, a group of white men killed him. Well, that's how the mill came in here, how the soldiers got in, Schwartz sent for them. They said we spent all we had moving that mill to Perry, and we wasn't just going to let them take it. They wanted the black men to work on the farm, and they wanted the white men to work in the mill. How we got a school out there, it must have been in the 50s. We wanted a larger school. Some of the other children were already coming over here to Williams Elementary. Well, they passed integration, so we were going to send our children to Kirby Smith. And I worked there at Kirby Smith, and I'll never forget it. They paid me $17.50 a week. And we cleaned all those classrooms at Kirby Smith every night. We washed the whiteboards and everything, and the highest pay was $17.50. But anyway, they were supposed to build a new Gainesville High School because Gainesville High School was on University Avenue. So they decided, my dad and 3 or 4 women, because he could haul them, they went to the school board, but they said there wasn't no money to build us a school out there. When the integration passed, that's how we got Duval. They give us a 6-room school, lunchroom and auditorium to keep our children from going to the white school. And they did that all around the county to keep us. Because a lot of people were moving out into this area. And you couldn't get nobody to contract hardly nowhere in Gainesville to really build a black person a decent house. The banks would not finance him until Mr. Emerald came. And he built Lincoln Estates. The first houses built for blacks was right there on Waldo Road and 7th Street. Them little stone houses there. Mr. Agnes built. And some of the prominent black people moved in them little stone houses. Until Mr. Emerald Common had to go to Jacksonville to get those houses financed. Because the banks would not let black people have too much money. And after he built Lincoln Estates, they built, we call it, Hollywood, cross over there. But during integration, in fact, they built Lincoln High School to keep us in our neighborhood. When they started to do the city in Gainesville, by being a university town, when the college students, when they would go for the demonstration, the college students would surround the blacks when they would go for a sit-in. Ooh, I can remember my oldest son. He was in one of those sit-ins. It was a eating place and drugstore. I think it's right there now where the Gainesville Shopping Center is. They was going to integrate that. The college students would surround the blacks to keep the whites from getting to them.
So the college students would help the blacks?
Yeah, black students, if they set up at the counter, say like at Woolworth Dime Store, the college students would line up behind them. That's how integration went in Gainesville.
So, did you go to Lincoln High School?
Yeah, I went to Lincoln High. That's what moved us over here.
Well, how was it?
Oh, yeah. Those was the good old days. You see, Lincoln High School was over there where Jones Elementary School is. I think it's a school for bad children over on 8th Avenue and Chestnut Street. Okay. That's where Lincoln High School was. And they built Lincoln High School over here. Then they closed it down when the whites had to come over here to Lincoln. They built East Side to take them out of the black community.
Well, why did the whites have to come over to Lincoln?
Integration. They had the zones. They would have riots at the schools. I can remember a riot I went to at the school my children were going to. I told them, don't let my children off the campus. They had a riot because some of the kids had rolled some out the bus at the other kids. And we had a meeting that night. Ooh, I can remember. We might as well adjust to it because the law says we got to do it. They had did everything they could to keep our children from mixing, but we don't have no choice.
What about them?
Maybe you was taught. Stop teaching your children about what they did in slavery, because maybe it took that to get America built, but it's built now and it's beautiful, and we got to integrate because the law says so. The Klansmen might as well pull off their hoods and go home because it's gonna happen.
What about the black armbands? Huh? The black armbands and all.
Yeah.
See, we had this group of blacks, that's what they call themselves, wearing the black armbands and stuff. You need to put that stuff away! Ooh, and the building got so quiet in there, I didn't realize what I had been saying. I've been talking about the Klansmen and what those black people were called, but I got away from them because I didn't want to talk to the media because I might have lost my job. They said what one of those parents said, but they didn't get my name. And so we got Lincoln High School.
When I went to Lincoln, it wasn't Lincoln. It was a segregated school. And you would think that that's not a good thing, but believe me, it was. Now, I'm not trying to come across as being anti-immigration. What I'm trying to say to you is that, well, who are the presidents of the activities? The Spanish Club, the Dramatics Club? Who are the people that,
Presidents?
Yeah, who would you think?
Was the students that went to Lincoln, right?
You're right, they look like you. So they were developing what? Leadership skills. So they were allowed to grow and develop in that way. See, I was always president of something. I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I was vice president of the student council 2 years, my junior year and my senior year. I was captain of the football team and the basketball team my senior year.
You were captain of the football and the basketball team?
Mm-hmm, yeah. I love football, especially. So I had sports. I had all of that. I had in 5 sports my senior year. Athlete of the year. But I was also number 4 in my class because I love school. But I was also in leadership roles and things that were very important to the students.
And see, we were not taught at Lincoln, let me just say. We were educated. See, there's a difference. See, when you're taught, it's between the covers of this book. But when you're educated, it's between the covers of that book and on the outside of the book, too. So we were nurtured in so many ways, see? You were taught how to date. Boys were taught how to cook. You were taught how to act. And you were also taught the Pythagorean theorem, algebraic expressions, and you were taught the periodic charts and Newton's 3 laws in the physics classes. But it never stopped, never stopped. Every day there was something to remind you that one day you had to be better than that other guy because of how you looked and who you were. Yeah. So that was embedded in us, see? When I got to A&T, I thought they were still going to be using the fingerboards. I had been brainwashed at Lincoln to think they were still used on the tables because that was important to our teachers. See, they wanted us to know in case we got into a situation where we... Do you know what a fingerboard is? I don't want to ask the audience, they may know. A fingerboard is a bowl of water. It was placed on the table. You were given a towel in those formal settings. And so when you got ready, before and after you ate, you just kind of daintily use the fingerboard, but daintily do your hands.
So you had lessons in etiquette, lessons in life.
Yeah.
You mentioned how to date.
Oh, yeah.
How to treat a young woman and open a door.
Oh, constantly. So you got all these lessons, see, and it helped you become a full, well-rounded person because what they were really trying to tell us is that you are somebody. Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think there's an important opportunity for us to gain some insight. You mentioned that you're not saying that segregation is good, but obviously the way you're articulating the words and your feelings, you feel that something's been lost.
Absolutely.
What is it that's been lost?
Identity. The value of history. There's so many things like personal respect for each other, family, community. Oh, we just lost so much. Look, I realize that, look, time doesn't stand still. You don't want to be here tomorrow. You got to progress in order to move forward, but we just lost the very core and fiber of those things that made us strong. And I think we lost a lot of that when we began to integrate the schools. For instance, what happened when we integrated the schools here in Alachua County? They closed Lincoln immediately. My younger brother Sherwin and hundreds of others were transported over to Gainesville High School to finish out the school year. Couldn't even wait for the school year to finish even. So what did that do to this community? Lincoln was the very hub of the black community. Everything happened virtually at Lincoln. School was accessible. The pride was here. This is where things happen. So that sense of community was lost. And you got to understand, Gainesville was not nearly as large as it is now. So when you start to talk about the things that occurred after integration, we begin to lose our identity. And while we are a melting pot and diversity is extremely important to me, we lost the very identity that brought us to this point. And see, what worries me about our history is that if it's not valued, we can very easily lose the ground that we've gained. I am not trying to come off as Ron Karenga or Angela Davis or anybody who's radical about this, but let me tell you, when I attended college, particularly North Carolina A&T, during the 60s, during the sit-ins, I appreciate why. And I had the privilege to march. See, they were demonstrating at A&T. I was scared to death coming from Gainesville. Hey, oh, Lord, oh, man, this crazy here in Greensboro.
What year was this?
That was 62. Yeah, Ezell, whom I knew, see, he got an African name now. I haven't really learned his new name, but I knew Ezell.
One of the 4 original lunchtime sitters in February 1960.
Yeah. Oh, those guys were really brave. So when I understood and started to attend some of the rallies we were having on campus, that sort of thing, it started to become clear to me why they were doing what they were doing. By the time I left A&T, my dormitory had been shot up. Yeah. And they recently tore it down. But for years, we fought against them, tearing down Scott Hall. See, they wanted to redo the wall. There were thousands of bullet holes in this wall where some of the guys on campus and the Black Panthers had a shootout with the National Guards in '68 when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Yeah, they wanted to tear down that wall. They eventually tore the building down. But we fought against it. We fought against it because we thought it was symbolic. And it was symbolic as to what had happened. So, when I got back here to my dear old Florida and started graduate school here, I recall looking up one day and seeing the firemen spraying water on students in front of Tiger Hall. Oh, Lord, they just thought that was the biggest thing here in Gainesville and in the newspapers, the Gainesville Sun. Oh, it was just all over the papers. Oh, students demonstrating fire and spraying them with water.
What year was that?
That was 1972. See, I completed my coursework here in 71, 72.
Was that before or after the black student walkout to take over the president's office?
It may have been during. See, my wife and I, we were up in this area. We used to live over in Diamond Village. And we looked out one day, saw them spraying water on students. We just turned around and walked the other way. Now, that was not to diminish, degrade, or demean what was going on. It's just that, well, we just left the place where they had shot up the dormitory. We lost 2 students and they sprayed water, and that's supposed to be a big deal? No, it wasn't a big deal, not to us. We just left the place where there was real violence going on. We were standing in our apartment one morning and the National Guard was dropping tear gas bags onto Scott Hall. And we could just see that. And we could hear all day and all night. And I was at the hospital. I had a pass to go to work at the hospital because of all the injuries that were occurring. See, so I had to go to work as an orderly. See, I worked at night from 11 to 7, went to school during the daytime, and they were bringing in wounded National Guards. Now, as I say, we lost a couple of students during that shootout. Wounded National Guards. Now, was any of that the right way to handle it? Or the right thing to do? No, it wasn't. But it happened. And we were there. Oh, I lost so much during my college days. My wife and I. So our perspective differed from the other students here at UF. And other blacks who were coming. I think there were about 90. I think there were 90. I used to remember how many black students there were when I was graduate school. think it was 90 something, if you can believe that. Aren't there about 5,000 or 6,000 now?
I think it's about 4%.
Okay. Well, it's less than 100 when I was there. So, I returned to an environment that was much like what I left, because you couldn't come on here when I graduated high school.
You talked about the Panthers, you talked about Karanga, you talked about Angela Davis. What do you think about Karanga and the whole, this is within the movement, the whole world is watching. It was the Vietnam War, the Panthers, Bobby Seale.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they were brave. Brave people. Now, some would say we should have done like Ralph Bunch, sat at the table and negotiate. Yeah, I love what some of our more contemporary black philosophers have to say. I call Dick Gregory a black philosopher.
You gotta love Dick Gregory.
Oh, yeah, well, maybe we should have sat at a conference table and negotiate. But maybe we needed a couple of folks willing to throw a rock or two through a window, too. Think you needed a little of both. And that's just a factual thought.
Malcolm Martin, that kind of
right, yes.
You reminded me earlier. I was thinking of Chris Rock. I was thinking of the humorous Chris Rock. I loved when he talked about Shaq is rich, but the white man who signs his checks is wealthy.
Yeah. You needed a little of both. But did it make sense to burn down our communities?
Talking about 65?
Yes! All of that! Oh, God, it's so much. But you got to give the hippies credit. I mean, there were some who were supportive and sympathetic, understood, didn't go along with the way mainstream America was leaning. And, so there are good people on both sides of the spectrum. Now, let's face that. And see, I am not trying to come across as being anti-anything, because I am an extremely proud black male. My philosophy teacher, Dr. McLaughlin. He used to say, I'm a mean Negro. Oh, he would say that. Best courses I ever took. Oh. Now see, I was a science major. I believe I shared that with you. I love my science. But I can't really remember why. I used to tease my wife being a liberal arts major. Girl, you are not going to get a decent job being a liberal arts major. You better get yourself some science or some math. And she would say to me,
you need to take some liberal arts courses.
We were married before I finished, and she told me,
baby, I think you should take some philosophy. I just see you as someone who would really love philosophy because of the way you think.
Is it A&T?
Yeah, A&T. She kind of psyched me out on that one. I took one philosophy course. Ooh, fell in love. I love it. Never had a course this good. I took another one. Yeah. Dr. McLaughlin. I took 3. One of them, all of them, yeah. Soren Kierkegaard. And those guys who come before me and think, and you start to talk about realism, idealism, existentialism. I found out I was an existentialist. I mean, all this stuff was coming at me. I didn't know what was going on. See, I'm always locked up in a laboratory somewhere doing an experiment, trying to find an element. And look at that. But I really fell in love with philosophy when I found out who I was. Oh, and that was like a conversion for me. Really was. Really was a conversion. You know, it's kind of like when you You know, when you go down the aisle in church and accept Jesus and get baptized. It really was a conversion. And see, Dr. McLaughlin, he would always talk about the conditions of the way things were then, as opposed to now. Well, see, now it's all different. That's a whole nother story. But he would tell anyone of another persuasion.
I'm a mean Negro.
He would tell the class.
I wouldn't want them to treat me anyway because I'm a mean Negro.
And I carried that with me all the way to this day. Our mentees, my wife and I, my godsons, I would explain to them what a Negro was. See, it wasn't a derogatory term. It's just one of the many names that we've been called. And when you really get down to the science of it, it's really rather a scientific name. So I would explain that to them, and sometimes they would say to me,
Mr. White, something may be going on. We mean Negroes.
And I would say, yes,
we mean Negroes.
my grandsons, I have them saying that sometimes. Anyway, it wasn't for anything other than to give them some pride in themselves. That's all it was. Wasn't anything meant to have them be upset with anybody or dislike anybody. It's just that I wanted them to feel good about who they are. That's all. It's a very important motto.
Lincoln, never been?
Oh, God. The band was just as popular as the football team.
Football team that what? Lost maybe 20 games ever?
There weren't that many. Not at all.
You talked a little bit before we started the interview about the rivalry that existed, a friendly rivalry between Lincoln and Mabane. What are your feelings or reflections on Mabane?
Same county, only 12, 15 miles apart. Sort of like the FSU Florida rivalry, only closer. Yeah. Folks that we knew and were friends with, but when it came to sports, we didn't know them. Oh, yeah, that was a tremendous rivalry. Yeah. The 3 guys from Mabane went to college with me. Yeah, we knew each other during high school, but became like brothers at A&T, of course. Yeah. It was a good rivalry. It was a healthy rivalry, see. And that game was played during the week of Thanksgiving.
So, just like Florida and Florida State?
Yeah.
The Saturday after Thanksgiving?
No. Well, we played on Thursday nights.
Thanksgiving night?
No. On this particular occasion, the game was moved to Wednesday night, but our regular games were played on Thursday night when I was in high school. Oh, man. Folks would be in town for Thanksgiving, and the place would be packed. I mean, jam-packed. Oh, be so much excitement. And then the bands would compete. Yeah, because, you know, most of the black band directors had gone to FAMU, see? So they would tailor their band after FAMU. And you know how good FAMU is.
Francis Murray, he was a mail carrier here. He passed a white and he passed a black, but you couldn't tell it because instead of going to Lincoln High School, he's going to Gainesville High School. He gets tired of Gainesville High, he'd come on back to Lincoln.
Well, we couldn't go to Gainesville High School, but they'd be going, and they'd be walking with them and laugh and talk, and we'd be, well, we know, but we know something you don't know. Now, when they be waving at us and we waving back, and Marvin and Francis Murray went to downtown, went to the 10-cent store, and they'd be sitting at the counter drinking coffee, eating sandwich, and they wouldn't serve us. We couldn't go, but they was in there. I said, well, oh well, you serving us anyway, but you don't know it. And they had to go to the white to get their hair done. Go to the white beauty parlor. That's where they went and got their hair done. You couldn't tell them. They just like white. They blonde hair, curly, but their daddy was one of the mail carriers here.
I was one of the first 7 black students to enroll in an undergraduate program here at the University of Florida in 1962. Bear in mind the turmoil that was in the country during that time. You had James Meredith trying to get into the University of Mississippi, and you had Wallace standing in the schoolhouse door at the University of Alabama. They had to call out federal troops to get Wallace out the door. And there were the police with their water hoses, hosing down blacks who were marching. And the dogs, police dogs. So it was a terrible time for Southern schools, Southern universities. So when I decided to enroll, I'm thinking, is this going to be another Mississippi or Alabama type situation? So there was some anxiety there, but I was determined to go through with it. I enrolled and got my undergraduate degree in 1965. And then I went out and got my master's degree and taught high school for a year. And then came right back to law school. And so 3 years of undergrad, 1 of grad, and 3 of law school. And I've never been in a classroom with another black student in it. It was a different world. But after the initial year or 2, things seemed to get better. Students were friendlier. By the time I got to law school, it was a very friendly environment. I joined study groups with white students because I was the only black at the school, and we studied at their various apartments at night. When it was all over, I was elected vice president of the senior class at the law school. I graduated in 1970. When I first got out of the University of Florida, the only thing I wanted to do was get as far away from this institution as possible, because I had no real pleasant memories here.
Students in that day, and I think today, when they graduate at historically black colleges, they have classmates.
Oh yeah, well John was from the city. He was in my fraternity.
We hung out together. I had none of that. My college slate was just wiped clean because there was nobody but me. I will tell you this though. I know it made me a stronger person because when I got out of the university and the law school, I just didn't think there was anything I could not accomplish if I put my mind to it. So there was no hostility by the students when we started in 1962. There were a couple of incidents where people would say a little something, smart talk, but nothing confrontational. Mainly, we were just ignored. Nobody spoke to me. I can remember walking up to a black janitor one day, to talk to somebody. And he was scared to talk to me. He's saying, I may lose my job. So it was a very lonesome existence. And I spent a lot of time, my first year or 2, walking around campus. And I probably said 3 words all day. Those 3 words were present when my name was called in class. And I spent a lot of time sitting on a bench and possibly the American dream. Of course, when I go sit on the bench, everybody leaves the bench but me. So I'm left on the bench. But I think one of the things that perhaps made it a little easier for me was that Gainesville was my home. So I stayed at home, and I could easily leave this all-white environment and go back over to the black community and be home with mom and daddy. Mama's cooking home-cooked meals, and I'm sort of just telling them about my experiences. But of course, they really couldn't comprehend it because they hadn't been through it. They both went to Bethune-Cookman College. That's where they met and all. Well, some of the students lived in houses around campus, and some lived in houses around town. Well, only 2 of us graduated. Me and John Cena Williams. The other 5 dropped out. Quit. One had a nervous breakdown. But that was student life back then, if you will. There was no student life.
With us, we automatically knew that we had to step back. Ooh, I can remember going to the hamburger place on 13th Street. Had my 2 children, and we waited. And another one come up and she pointed over there.
What do you want?
Looking all over us, and I had to step up and say, wait a minute, honey. We've been standing here long enough. I said, you go get the manager before you serve anybody else. Naturally, everything got quiet. I said, you can't decide segregation. The government decides it, so I think you better wait on us. And the manager come out and I say, I don't know whether I want it now or not. And he come out and he fix us sandwiches. No charge. Another incident I had. I was putting gas in the car and my little girl wanted to go in the bathroom. The guy said,
We don't have a bathroom for the colored.
but integration had passed. I said, I tell you what, you didn't tell me that before you put that gas. I hadn't paid for it yet. So you can have your gas back and I'll go. And he gave me the key.
Just let it go.
And I went to the car and I said, anybody else want to go in the bathroom? Because I wasn't going to pay him for that gas. See, we sort of went through little things. It's sort of funny now. Like this Woolworth store. My dad used to go around the back and get sandwiches and drinks and stuff. So we were downtown and I told my mama, I say, because she loved coffee, I said, come on over here and have a cup of coffee. And she didn't want to go. And I said, come now that you have a chance to go, you better take advantage of it and use it. And so we went over there and she said,
ooh, what if they spit in it or something?
That next week, I made sure they had that place there called Primal's Grill downtown. It's right there near where the state attorney's office is. It used to be a white restaurant, a really exclusive white restaurant. I had taken her there and she was scared to go in there. She didn't want to go. Mama, come on.
I didn't think I'd ever have a white woman waiting on me.
See, she was pretty old. She was in her 40s when I was born. Had she lived another 2 months, she would have been 100 when she died.
How did you decide on going to UF? First, I should ask what years did you attend UF?
I got started in September of 1968, but that goes back to the family tree and family influence. Again, being a part of the college-educated group, it wasn't even a second thought that, yeah, you would go to college, but the college we were thinking would be Florida A&M or Bethune-Cookman because most of my family went there. That was where we were going to go. But in 1967, one of my physical education coaches discovered that I could run, jump, and excel better than my classmates. That led to me joining the track team. It led to me being better and better. It culminated in a state championship for track and field.
As a result of that, I was recruited by the University of Florida and several Southeastern Conference schools and some schools outside of the conference as a track and field athlete. That was really the beginning of the trek to the University of Florida, despite my dad's protest. It reminded me of that time back in 1965 when he said, I don't think you should go over there because you guys are going to get hammered. As we continued to discuss this, my father and I, he realized with the influence of family members and friends that it would be a great opportunity for me to get a quality education and at no cost. Now, although he was very reluctant, and with very good reason, he decided to let me attend the University of Florida. I can tell you this. During those years, he was instrumental in calming my fears, despite being 18 years old with no fears at all. Now, he was just amazed that I received so many different threats to my life because I was offered a scholarship as the first black athlete to the University of Florida. But they were death threats, threats of demise to the entire family.
Were these threats coming from Gainesville or Ocala?
There may have come some from Gainesville, but the local folk took the lead in making those threats. It's been documented that even some of the state legislators during that time were against the University of Florida awarding a scholarship to a black athlete, which surprises me. Now, I didn't realize this until many years later. But again, being 18 years old, there was no fear.
And when did these threats start to appear?
Oh, immediately. And therefore, my father was very reluctant.
I am not letting you go over there and die. You're not going over there and let somebody harm you. You can get your college education somewhere else. Somewhere where people like you and accept you.
So I'm thinking, okay, University of Tennessee. UT offered me one, and they had a great track and field program. And there were two considerations. Quality education being number one, and then a great track and field program being number two. And they kind of flip-flop depending on how good a week I had on the track. But if I had it to do all over again, I'd do the same thing.
No regrets?
None whatsoever. Prejudice actually extended up to Gainesville my first year at the University of Florida. Now, it was not without some consternation and a bit of angst on my part. But again, the 18-year-old mentality overcame all of that. Oh well, so what? Big deal. I'm stronger than any of that. At the athletic dormitory, Yon Hall, where I discovered this thing had permeated up through the system because some of the athletes were also obviously prejudiced. And there was some dissatisfaction or disagreement with the fact that I was eating at the same training table with the rest of them. It was Jack Youngblood. And many of us know who Jack Youngblood was, but you may not. Now, he's a local sports hero here at the University of Florida as a defensive lineman. Jack Youngblood's the guy who ended all of that within several weeks of my arrival. Now, I would sit at the training table alone, and you may have one or two of my track buddies to join me because they just felt like they should. But if they weren't in the training room, I would probably just sit alone. Until one day, Jack Youngblood walked up to me and said, "Why are you sitting by yourself, boy?" And I'm thinking, oh God, my dad was right. I'm going to die right here, right now. So I stood up and thought I would die standing up.
Is there something wrong with you?
No, nothing wrong with me.
Well, can I sit with you?
I was literally just flabbergasted. Yeah, if you want to. That right there put an end to any prejudice on the athletic side of the dormitory, as it were. That was a story that I will always remember for the rest of my life.
I see what you mean. He had that much sway even outside his sport.
Yeah, he's a natural born leader. Plus, he excelled on the football field, and they didn't want to disrespect him. Ooh, he was a head basher.
Before total integration came about in schools, communities raised their own children, and in a lot of cases, we raised our own food, and there wasn't a need for actually going to some of the white establishments for things. You only went if there were necessities and things you really, really needed, like groceries, stuff like that. As far as clothing and stuff like that, my grandmother made all our clothes, so as far as clothing stores and stuff like that, we never had to go to the stores for our clothes. She made trousers, shirts, coats.
So did you ever feel like you were missing out on anything?
No, not really. That's why before integration came about, it did not bother me. Well, some things did bother me. Books. Not being able to have new books, knowing that books had to be new at one time. The hand-me books that had messages to them in the books that was directed to us. One thing I will never forget, we used to go to the University of Florida to sell Cokes and Pepsi Colas, and this particular game, the Gators lost to Miami 3-0. The students were upset. I was caught with a tray of sodas, so I went outside the gate to sell my sodas and get my little profit, $2.40 back. I reached for a soda. Some students surrounded me and started kicking and spitting on me and calling me all sorts of names. That's why I'm not a Gator today. I ran out of fear. I ran from all the way in front of the entrance of the stadium to Fifth Avenue. As a matter of fact, I was a senior that year. I was working in order to be able to afford my class ring, my graduation invitations, my cap and gown, stuff like that. I was an experience.
When I graduated from high school, I really wanted to go to Howard. I didn't have the money. I was accepted. I was also accepted to Bethune-Cookman at FAMU. Now, you have to realize that there's an application fee. So, first of all, I didn't even have the money to pay the application fee. So, my sister Eloise Cody's mother-in-law paid my application fee. I had to be selective about how many schools I was sending my application to, especially knowing I wasn't going to get any money. As it turns out, my sister Eloise and her husband Cody got adopted in Marion County. When they moved to Marion County, there was a community college there called Hampton Junior College. And so I went to live with them when I went to community college there.
At the end of my second year, just before graduation, the President Jackson, called several of us into his office and said that he had had a request from the University of Florida for students that he felt would excel at the University of Florida. He said, "Miss Moore, I'm recommending you for the College of Nursing. You still want to go to nursing school?" And I said yes, because I had applied to Tuskegee at the time, and Tuskegee had accepted me, but I didn't know if I could make it at Tuskegee financially. So this door opened, and the College of Nursing at the University of Florida invited me to come over for an interview. And so the other students 2. Both young men, both majoring in biology, both came as well. I had my interview with the College of Nursing Dean Smith, and Dean Knowles was the assistant dean at the time, and I was accepted. I was the first Black nursing student to be extended that invitation. I accepted, and another friend of mine came from Hampton. Her name was Bertha Williams. As it turns out, there were 5 of us that entered from Hampton that September, and so it felt like I had a support system. Bertha and I roomed together off of 3rd Avenue with a gentleman named Alex Tom. That's where we were sent. They wouldn't give us housing on campus. Now, that doesn't mean that the others didn't have housing on campus, because when those first students entered the university, 2 of the students did get housing. But anyway, Bertha knew this gentleman. He had an extra room and an area on the back of his home, which was very nice, had just remodeled. And so we went to live with him. I was okay with that because there were 2 of us, and he worked at the hospital. He was an orderly. And at the end of the first trimester, the other 4 were out of here. Well, either some were on probation and some just didn't make it. The 2 gentlemen were on probation and they decided, looky here, I ain't never been in this position before. I've always been at the top of my class. And so they left, and they went to live in Cookman. That was 2, and Bertha was the 3rd, and I was the 4th, and the 5th one never came. You see, the numbers started dwindling before we even got started. Here I was. And there was another young lady who came from Gibbs Junior College, Betty Keat. And she and I roomed together for a short while during the 2nd trimester, and I think she left in the middle of the trimester. She was in nursing too. And then there was a student from Pompano. She was married. She was traveling back and forth because she had a family of 3 children and a husband. She didn't spend much time with me or with the other students because I think she just had a lot on her mind, and she just basically was a person that kept to herself. Neil Butler was married. As a matter of fact, he was married for the 2nd time, and he was an expecting father. But he was already an LPN, and his wife was an LPN, so that didn't really give me a support system. So, anyway, yes, this was my first experience with an integrated situation. Now, you have to realize that I came in 1965. The first students to enter the university as undergraduates was 1962, so there wasn't but a handful of us there. I didn't tell people that I graduated from the University of Florida because I think you need to understand. First of all, a lot of Black people might not have even known about the University of Florida. They thought it was a far-fetched idea. It was one of those things that the memories of the University of Florida. My experience here was very traumatic at times. I wasn't ranting and raving. I mean, I just didn't have the same kind of joy and pride when I said I had graduated from the University of Florida as a student from Bethune-Cookman or FAMU. And you see, when I went to the university, when I spent time on Florida A&M's campus, I felt so much pride just being able to visit my sisters in college, or when my high school drama club was presenting a play. It just felt like home. It just felt like a place where I belong. When I was at the University of Florida, I did not have a feeling of belonging. And so that's why you don't just dredge up stuff and talk about stuff you don't feel good about. And I have been asked to leave the University of Florida College of Nursing.
First of all, she had the experience of fainting in one of her classes, and when she fainted, she was sent to the infirmary. Now, the infirmary then sent her down the hill to a neurologist to check it out and see if she had seizures. And they ended up with a diagnosis saying that she had little seizures, or petit mal seizures. So they put her on Dexedrine, and this was her 2nd year here, her 3rd trimester, and she was taking med-surg. So they put her on Dexedrine in the morning, which is an upper, and phenobarbital, which is a sedative for the brain at night. So she was a mess. She couldn't stay awake, and she was all jittery, and this was very trying for her. And there was no one who would advocate for her, no one who she could counsel with or talk to, because she didn't have an advisor. Now, the white students may have had an advisor, but she didn't have an advisor.
So one day, one of the graduate nursing advisors had an opportunity to fill in for one of the undergraduate instructors, and so she saw her state. She was able to take one look at her and see that something was not right. And so she asked her to stay afterwards, and she did. You could see that this is still very emotional and very painful for her because she did not have seizures. Yet, she was treated for seizures. They could have easily put her on Librium or Valium, one of the anti-anxiety medications. They could have sent her to counseling. They didn't have to do that to her. And so, the med-surg instructor asked her what was going on because she was the talk around in the College of Nursing. She knew that. She had no doubt about it. She told her, "Don't take any more of that medication. What the hell are they trying to do to you?" She said, "I will take care of this." Those were exactly her words. She said, "I will take care of this."
Now, shortly after that, she was called in by the dean, Dean Smith, and she invited her, or she gave her an opportunity to withdraw, and invited her to go over to FAMU. Well, what you have to understand is that at the time, FAMU was not accredited. They had lost their nursing accreditation. She couched it this way: "I feel like you would do better in an environment where they're more like you."
Not one time did they offer her any tutoring. Not one time did they say,
"Evelyn, we're going to assign you to Miss Doe, and Miss Doe is going to be there for you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can go and ask her."
Not one time. But they did invite her to go somewhere else to finish her education.
Now, I didn't invite myself to the University of Florida. I was extended an invitation. Now, the same people who extended me an invitation also extended me an invitation to leave. I talked to my mother about it when I was home on break, and she said,
"Marie, did you fail?"
I said, "No, ma'am." And my dad said,
"Well, you know, she keeps crying, and she did get sick."
"She didn't fail. What did you go there for?"
"I went to get a nursing education."
"Well, what's back here for you?"
"Nothing, Mama."
"Well, you can't come home, because there's nothing here for you. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to pray for you. Your daddy and I are going to plant all this acres here in corn, and we're going to get some additional money. We're going to just ask God to just bless you. And you keep going to church, and you keep praying, and you keep doing your best. That's all we can offer to you. But you can't come home. Didn't you go down there to get an education?"
So, it was a traumatic experience, and it is still painful. But I do have to say this. This med-surg instructor stepped up and stepped in. Now, she couldn't do for me perhaps what I needed to have done, but she recognized that I was on the wrong medication, and that what I needed was not to be sedated and then given an upper to keep me going during the day. And so she made the decision to protect me. Another experience I had, and this is just something that stuck out in my mind. It wasn't something that I wanted to share. Yes, when I applied for a job, I put the University of Florida College of Nursing, and that was my degree. But I would just sit quietly. Most didn't even know I had a degree. It wasn't something that I wanted to announce. We had no graduation ceremony, and we didn't even have a pinning ceremony this summer when I graduated. And I've been back to talk to two of the instructors that were there at the time. One a graduate instructor and one a skills instructor. But I didn't have her for my skills, I had somebody else. And in celebrating the 50th anniversary of the College of Nursing, she could not find anything about that year. Couldn't find pictures. And I said to myself, you know what? This might have something to do with me. It just might have something to do with me. I'm not so naive to think that it didn't have something to do with me. Why could she find everything else about that year, but she couldn't find anything about me? And when I graduated and I took the nursing boards, you know what section of the nursing boards I failed? Med-surg. So that tells you I wasn't dumb, I wasn't stupid. But a period of time out of my life was blocked out by phenobarbital and dexedrine. I worked psych the first year I got out of school. I had a really good experience in psych because of my instructor, and also, I think it's my passion. I have a passion for people who are challenged in that way. And so she told me,
"Evelyn, you are not stupid. You are not dumb. How many others could have made it feel like you have done and still be holding up your head? So I'm going to help you. I'm going to counsel with you, and you are going to study. I'm just going to encourage you, and when you go to take that section of the boards again, you are going to pass."
Sure enough, I did. I only failed by 2 points the first time. So that tells you that had I not had that experience there, I would have passed all of my boards. But let me tell you what happened after I didn't pass my boards. I was called in again. I'm already out of school by now, by the dean and the assistant dean to lambaste me and to tell me what an embarrassment I was to the College of Nursing. I was working at Shands. Remember, I'm working the psych unit at Shands. I said, well, lo and behold, are y'all not satisfied that you didn't get me out? And now you want to say that I'm an embarrassment again? They did not offer any assistance for me taking the boards the first time. No, that was not their aim. That was not their aim. That was just some of the experiences that I had.
I was born here in Gainesville. I'm Joel Buchanan. I'm the third of 4 children. I attended Lincoln High School, then I left Lincoln High School when the NAACP, locally under the leadership of Reverend Thomas A. Wright, who was president of the main branch of the NAACP, with Charles Chestnut III, who was president of the youth branch, and I was a member of the youth branch. And in 1964, the NAACP wanted to integrate the public school system, and they needed some children to test to see if we were able to go to school. And out of the children he asked, I was one that said I would ask my parents to use my name for the suit that was filed against the school board. And after taking a series of tests, I think there were 8 of us. 3 students were selected, 2 girls and 1 boy. I was the boy. And we integrated Gainesville High School in 1964. I graduated Gainesville High School on time and got a scholarship to the new community college, Santa Fe Community College. I went there for 1 year and came to the University of Florida and got a degree in English and math. Taught in the public school system for, I forget how many years. Came back and got an advanced degree in education. Went back and had more than 20 years in the public school system and community college. And now, here I am at the University of Florida.
It was a shocking experience, and no one could tell us what it was like because it had not been done in this city or county or state prior. We were the first 3, and I pretty much knew it was going to be different because I was going from an all-black school to a prominently white one, and I was going to be the one to integrate it. I didn't realize there was such a resistance among the white community for an African-American to come there until it happened. I saw a level of hate that I've never seen before because my mother worked for a prominent white family, the Murphys, and there would be times where we would go to the home for activities. And I was here on campus where there was exposure for being a student at Gainesville High School. And there were 3 of us. The girl ahead of me was LaVon Wright, and she was in the 12th grade. And I was in the 11th grade, and Sandra Williams was in the 10th grade. We, the 3 students, along with the assistant principal of Lincoln High School, where I attended previously, met with the chief of police downtown before we went to school to discuss the safety of the 3 of us. They discussed that we could be assassinated. They talked about it as if it was a possibility. We went to school in an unmarked police car, went to our designated classes, and left after school. We were not encouraged to participate in any activities or go to any activities after school because they were concerned with the safety of the 3 of us. The 3 of us surprised the community because it was perceived that we weren't prepared, but we were prepared. LaVon graduated on time, and I think she was in the top 5% of her class. I graduated on time, and I was in the top 10% of my class, and Sandra did as well. So we all graduated on time, and it was a challenging experience, but I'm glad we had the experience. I don't know if it was hard. I just remember there was certain places you couldn't go, and I came up in a family, you couldn't go anywhere unless you went with someone else. And I remember we had to do major shopping. We did that in Jacksonville. And I remember there were certain stores I couldn't go in. And a pleasant memory I have is of a restaurant on the corner of 13th called Captain Louis Seafood. And I remember we would go to the back door of the restaurant and stand outside to order the meal. And the cook would come and he would take your order and he would wait until he had time to cook it and bring it to you. And I told myself that eventually I would be able to go on that restaurant because the only difference between those that were inside and outside was skin color. And I knew how to behave, and I had good table manners, so I was determined to go in there. And I finally had a chance to visit Captain Louis when they allowed students to go in. The place that I was arrested from was across the street from Captain Louis, a restaurant on the corner of 13th where Krispy Kreme sits today, called Humpty Dumpty Restaurant. 6 of us went in for lunch. It was a drive-in, and a group of blacks drove in onto the parking lot, and the manager or whoever went outside. And when they went outside to deal with the people in the car, the 6 of us walked in the restaurant, and we took a seat, and they locked the door. We were told they weren't going to serve us. Then they took us to jail. And when we went to court, all I remember telling the judge is that all we did was sit down and ask for lunch. We were prepared to pay. We were not served. We were put on probation. So my parents and my family accepted what was happening, and that I was the only one in my family willing to make a difference, and I'm glad I made a difference. And the thing is, when I was demonstrating the years at Gainesville High School, and when I came to the University of Florida, they supported those things I was in, and they made sure I had the necessary tools I needed in order to be successful, and they supported what I was doing. When I had to go to court, the person that went with me was my mother. And when I had to be put on probation and go to the courthouse to visit the judge, I think it was weekly or bi-weekly, she supported it, but it was the first and the last time. My mother was very much into what I was doing. She supported what I was doing. My father did not want me to do it because he feared for my life, but once I made the decision I was going to do it, and my mother supported me, pretty much gave me the support as well.
Was being integrated into the high school and not being able to shop in some stores, is that your first memory of segregation?
Yes and no. I do remember that everybody in my neighborhood where I lived was black, and I do remember there was a certain part of town you couldn't go in. And I remember when things were beginning to change and we started picketing, I was the only one in my family willing to participate. I had done a science project, and I had to be in the 8th or 9th grade. And I'd gotten little white mice. And I did a project on the essentials of vitamins to the body. And I showed what vitamins A, E, and C would do to the body and lack thereof. I won the competition. I went to regionals, and I won that. I went to states, and state was not integrated. My project was entered into the competition, and it had won. And the day when students are there to say what they had done and why I wanted to go to my project, but I was told I couldn't go. And I questioned why, and they said it wasn't my project, but it was my project. They said it looked like a project that a white student would have done, and I did not understand that. I had done a quality project, and I could not be seated next to my project. And I won the award, but it was given to me later. I was determined that if nothing else, I was going to see that that was never going to happen to another student again. That was the only time I can remember having to do with skin color and what I could and could not do.
Most of my closest friends' parents were also educators. Then I had other friends that their parents were farmers. It was like a dichotomy. I did farm work and all types of odd jobs. In fact, working in the fields convinced me that was something I didn't want to do. In the back of my mind, I'm going, I'm going to get me an education. So when it's hot in the summer, I'm in AC. And when it's cold in the winter, I got me some heat. That's the way I looked at it.
You mentioned a scholarship. What was the scholarship for?
It was a scholarship to pay the books and tuition at the school of my choice.
Was it academic?
It was academic.
What other schools were you considering?
I had a chance to go to West Point, Harvard, University of Tampa, University of Miami. There are a couple of others.
That's a pretty impressive list. How did you choose UF over those schools?
Well, I had a conversation with my grandmother, and we said the next school or recruiter I talk to, I'll go there. Just so happened to be somebody from UF.
What had you heard of UF?
Not a whole lot. I knew it was the school in Florida. And I knew about the football team because when I was in school, I played football, basketball, ran track. And it was close to home, so I said, I guess I'll go.
Were you considering doing any of these activities at the university?
Nah, I didn't have college-type talent.
What years did you attend the university?
I came in the fall of '69 and I graduated summer of '74. And needless to say, race relations weren't exactly inviting for black students. You know, my late grandfather, he grew up in Alachua. And he really didn't want me to come here because of the racism he experienced. You know, there used to be a sign at the old depot in Gainesville that read, "Nigger, if you can read, run. If you can't read, well, run anyways." You know, Alachua was some real racist. And then when I was moving in, I had my roommate come in and, you know, being the friendly guy I am, I got off and I was like, "Hi, my name's Joe." And I held out my hand to shake his hand. And he looked at me, turned around, and I never saw that guy again. I think that year, up until the point in time we came, it was the largest class of black students at the university. You know, very quickly, we formed strong bonds. The Black Student Union was already in existence then, but it was very low-key. So me and several other guys, we got together and we did the constitution of the BSU. We more or less modeled it after the Black Panthers. So, you know, we had a chairman, a minister of information, minister of defense, that sort of thing. And that was the same year that an incident happened that I will never forget. You know, the only year that I lived on campus was my first year. So, you know, I was in South Hall. I had the biggest room on the yard down on the ground floor. And, you know, there was only one black student per floor. And naturally, I made friends with the janitorial staff. So anyways, some guys over in North Hall, they decided to go in the bathroom and throw feces at each other. So this one black janitor that I made friends with, he was a pastor. He came up to me and he said, "Well, they expect us to clean it up." I said, "You know what, Rev, you don't have to worry about that. I'll take care of it." So I got on the phone, and in about 20 minutes, I had 15 other guys in my room. We walked over to North Hall to check out the bathroom situation, and it was atrocious. No, that was the same year that Willie Jackson and Leonard George came in. They were the first 2 black football players at UF. So, you know, we put Jacob at one end of the hallway, and then we put Earl Wilcox at the other end. Earl was also a big guy. So we ran down, we knocked on all the doors, and we said, "Hey, y'all made this mess, and you're gonna clean it up."
Were they black students?
They were all white students.
Why do you think they did that?
I have no idea.
Were they reprimanded for doing that?
What happened is, after we made the ultimatum, they called the area director, and then UPD shows up. They called me down to talk to them, and I said, "Hey, those guys had a shit fight, and they need to clean it up." They looked at us like we were crazy. So, after that, we had a standoff for several hours. I said, "We aren't going anywhere until this gets cleaned up." So the guys that had the shit fight eventually cleaned it up. So after that, about 8 of us would go around to the different dormitories on the weekends, and if the hallways and the bathrooms were really messy, we would knock on the doors and make whoever was there say, "Hey, y'all clean this up. And if it's not cleaned up by the time we get back in 2 hours, well, we're gonna see why it won't be cleaned up." It wasn't about the restrooms per se. It was that me and some of the other guys, we felt that they weren't paying the maids and the janitors enough money to be doing that extra work. So the black people that worked on campus were really glad to see us there. Now, I had several people come up to me saying, "I don't know what you're doing, but we used to wouldn't get through till 3, 4 a.m. Now we get through at about 11 or midnight." And then there was this one lady in the cafeteria. She was a cashier, and I had a meal card, so I would pick out this and that. She said, "You know, bro, you don't gotta do that. Just get whatever you want." So whatever I got, it always came out to 99 cents. So I guess that was their way of protesting.
Our next speaker will be Sam Haley, representing the Black Student Union at the University of Florida.
Good afternoon, niggas. N-I-G-G-E-R-S, N-I-G-G-A-S. Pronunciation varies a little bit, but basically you are the new niggers. It's very interesting, you know. I didn't realize one could achieve such a mental orgasm by calling somebody that. Nigger. Well, it's happened again. John Parker got zilched yesterday. I understand it almost happened right here at the glorious Mastigator. As I recall, he was once quoted as saying when he first came here that he would never coach black athletes. And I think that's why he's not coaching now. The American mentality says, of course, that we can run the football, we can't throw it, we can run it. I guess we haven't had enough physics in order to learn how to release the projectile at the correct angle and get it to the receiver. And we're viewed as sexual athletes, as mental idiots, as being somehow or other very loyal creatures. But I love my maid, and she likes us. Yeah, so you thought. I wish you could hear what your maid says about you behind your back. She was telling me, you know, my white woman sure is dumb. I swear she's dumb. Now, it's kind of funny. We have our own image of you and your sister, your parents, your representatives.
We don't think you're all that bright. You outnumber us, but we can overcome this deficiency. We merely recruit more niggers. And you've done a good job of it. Let your hair grow, wear funny clothes. You ought to see those rednecks looking at you going down University Avenue. If they could just get their hands on you, they might give some of our brothers a chance to get out of jail. Or maybe the cops are being so busy busting you, they might forget about us. Meanwhile, we get ready. We get ready because we have no choice. That great day is coming when black people are going to liberate black people. Now, in the process, if you don't like being niggas any longer by that time, we might be able to help liberate you. Need a little money for it, you know. A few pats on the back, recognition, but we'll help liberate you. Right now, we find some of you are our worst problem. You're stumbling all over yourselves trying to help us. We just got your parents pushed off our backs. Give us a break, okay? We know what to do if you just listen. We know how to achieve liberation if you just believe us. For instance, when the Black Panthers talked about guns, people rejected them. The thought of black students at Cornell with guns was just too much for the American mentality. Yet good and faithful rednecks have had guns on almost every college campus for as long as there have been guns on college campuses. This is nothing new. We merely want to protect ourselves. The police don't do it. Your representatives, your president certainly don't do it. So I guess the task falls on us. We will do it. Some people ask, well, what can we do? We are opting for change, drastic change. A change in the way America is run, a change in the way black people are treated. I don't just mean the violent, dramatic stuff that you read about occasionally. I think instead that what we need to get rid of is the subtle kind of intimidation that blacks, poor whites, and you good old niggas are subjected to. I mean, stuff like a friend of mine who's in the county jail right now, who came from work one night and was picked up by the police. I hear he was suspected of being a Black Panther. That was 6 months ago. He came up for trial about 3 weeks ago, a mistrial, and he's still in jail. He doesn't really know what it was he's supposed to have done, but he's in jail. Or like a poor kid who's had to share his food with roaches and rats all his life, who gets tired of seeing you driving your 442s and decides to lift your stereo tape deck, you know, in order to relieve you of the burden of wondering if it will be stolen. I find it very difficult to condemn someone in this position. I find it very difficult to condemn someone who's gone hungry most of his life, even in the presence of food stamps, who's lived in a house where you can look up and see the stars, where the only thing of value may be the television, his parents are worked to death, where there's misery and poverty. When he strikes back, when he lashes out against what's holding him down, I find it very difficult to condemn. in spite of the fact that he may break your windshield. Of course, I don't like to see anybody hurt, but anybody includes black people who are hurt all the time, and this is why we are opting for change. I don't like the kind of employment situation that we have on this campus, where non-academic personnel, black in particular, are automatically channeled because of educational deficiencies which they have nothing to do with, to the lowest jobs on campus. I have an uncle who died in April. He worked on this campus for 13 years. He started out as a janitor 1. He died as a janitor 1. Oh, I know how it feels to be in that position. I've been employed by one of your friend's parents. My wife has been employed by one of your friend's parents, and as a result of those experiences, we know what it is to be degraded and dehumanized, underpaid, overworked, insulted. We can no longer accept this. We cannot, as black people, put up with this anymore. At the same time, you, the glorious students of the University of Florida, are very much going about your daily business. Nothing very much has changed. You're almost all white, almost all fairly well off economically, almost all without very much concern for your fellow man. Almost all of you males are capable of going to Vietnam and killing a Viet Cong. Black people say, we won't go. Hell no! As a brother once said, no Vietnamese ever called me nigger. And he's got the jump on you. We won't kill him. Instead, we won't allow our minds to harbor such a contradiction as killing in another country while we ourselves are not free. If there is killing, unfortunately, it will have to be in America. But we don't like the idea of killing. We like the idea of life, liberty, brotherhood. But first of all, we must achieve liberty. Freedom. In this country, freedom for blacks means freedom from whites. Freedom from you, from your parents, from those of you who want to save us, from those of you who don't give a damn, and from those of you who are just outright hostile to us. We are going to determine our own destiny. We will do it by any means necessary. Any means necessary. Black people must get educated. I talked with your glorious registrar yesterday. Oh, he's not very much willing to allow black students in. Regardless of his reasons given, his actions, if followed, will keep this university almost all white. If you want something to do, that's something. Now that's something you could do fairly easily with fairly clean hands. You won't have the thought of blood on your hands. If we can get more black students into this university, distribute the knowledge, skill, and training of this society more equitably, there's room for black people here, so we can go back into our communities well-trained. America needs you to stand up, to refuse to be its niggers. We stop being them. Will you?
What year did you attend US?
That was in 1989. And pretty much every year after that, student government would try to zero fund the Black Student Union. And that seemed to be the theme every year. There was this whole thing that the black students were where they were because of affirmative action and that they really didn't belong. You know, just that whole Reagan era attitude still kind of prevailing. But the students who were president of the Black Student Union and other organizations, they were young, they were naive, and so they had really middle class. They hadn't encountered any real racism. And so they were easy. They would really, really trust the word of the student government. And then we had administrators who were basically white administration and presidents who had no clue of race or race relations. I gotta say, the whole Reagan era ball was still largely in place. You know what I mean?
Oh, so that's where we started for the undergrad students.
And they became adamant about not funding the BSU.
We are not going to fund the Black Student Union. We are not going to fund Black History Month, and we are not going to fund the African American Cultural Center.
In fact, while we were there, the African American Culture Center was vandalized by skinheads. I mean, they spray painted all kinds of, I don't remember, but you know.
Go back, blacks!
That kind of thing. N-word on the Black Student Union. The skinheads actually set up shop across the street from campus. And so we paid them a visit, and well, that turned out to be kind of confrontational. At one point, some shots were fired. I wasn't there when the shots were fired. I don't know who fired the shots, but things are kind of ugly. And skinheads started attacking African American students, and they attacked maybe 4 or 5. And it seems as if neither Gainesville police nor UF police was willing to follow up on it. And so we were going to deal with it. And we were pretty much peaceful in our tactics, but there were some members of our organization who weren't necessarily going to be peaceful. And so, like I said, shots were fired. I wasn't there, but after that, skinheads decided they weren't going to stick around anymore.
Right, and you organized. What organization specifically?
Our organization was, of course, the Loyal Fraternal Order of 99, or some people call it Private 99, because we believed that African Americans would be politically, economically, and socially extinct by 1999 unless significant action was undertaken. It was more or less the teamwork involved in whatever was happening in the African American community. There was one case where there was a store called Food for Less, I think. Yeah, it was a grocery store. And they were in the practice of physically assaulting African American shoppers if they suspected shoplifting. And so we moved in support of the relatives in the community and confronted the store personnel. The employees didn't know that they weren't supposed to be used as security. And so we just asked them in an open forum.
Well, if this gentleman here went out and tried to accost a so-called shoplifter and sustained an injury, would he be covered under workman's compensation?
And corporate people were like,
well, no.
I pretty much put a stop to that because once the employees realized that they were being used as lackeys by their bosses who were too cheap to hire real security, that shut that whole thing down. And then there was a case where Gainesville Police Department was not, they weren't enforcing, there was a feud between Gainesville Police and UF Police, whose turf was whose, where to enforce the law. And this was around the time that the skinheads were attacking African American students. And so they would call the police, and they would say,
well, where are you?
These attacks would often take place off campus, like across the street in Burger King, or somewhere over there in the student ghetto, as we used to call it. So UF police would be like,
well, we're not coming.
And Gainesville police would be like,
well, we're not coming either.
So we established that there was kind of this no man's land of enforcement in and around UF, and once we established that, they changed the rule giving UF police the right to respond to UF student issues within a 1-mile radius of the campus, but they were political more than radical. The Black Student Union was the largest group we dealt with most of the time, and we tried to radicalize them as much as possible, but they were young, they liked to party, they weren't as versed in the struggle as we were. And then with CRISSIE, at first we had kind of a adversary relationship with CRISSIE. They thought we were just out of control, rebel-rousing, causing trouble. And then there was a situation where a black fraternity had a party at a white fraternity house, and something happened. A fight broke out. Pretty much, according to one of the frat guys, they broke up the fight, but some of the white fraternity guys were still in the house, and they called the police, and like I said, by the time the police got there, the fight had been broken up, but of course, Gainesville police being Gainesville police decided to rough up some black folks just for the heck of it. And so, one of the officers slipped and fell, and his partner called and, shh,
officer down.
So we had police from, what happened was, this was around the time the Gainesville serial killer.
Oh, I've heard a bit about that, but not too much. Could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but I think he killed maybe 6 or 7 people, mostly young ladies, but it was crazy. I mean, it was really crazy before he got caught. Like when the bodies kept turning up, and you know some of them were students, like 3 or 4 were students, mostly young ladies. I think a guy got caught in the mix, but while he was on the loose, I mean, police presence was stepped up immensely. I mean, we had police from all over the state looking for him, and so there was this unusually high police presence. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, they were just there getting bored, you know? And so the incident took place, and I guess they were all on the same radio frequency or something. And this guy called, and shh, officer down. 42 police officers responded to the call.
Oh, wow.
And so after that, the university unofficially said that there could be no more black events on campus. But of course, CRISSIE didn't think that they were included amongst the blacks. You know, Jamaicans there, whatever, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Trinity.
I'm not black, okay?
Right.
The Caribbean Sunsplash was coming up, and they needed venues to host Caribbean Sunsplash events. But it was like,
no,
No, no, no, no, no.
So CRISSIE came to us and was like,
What's going on?
you didn't hear? You guys didn't hear what happened with the brawl. I mean, they pretty much declared there weren't going to be any more black events on any campus facility.
Oh, we're not black. We're not black.
Oh, okay, I'm telling you what it is.
It can't be that.
Oh, yes, it is. Then, when they realized that they were included with the rest of us who were black, then they came to us for help. And we were able to negotiate facilities for them, and the Caribbean Sun's black slave would go on. And we were pretty much in full acceptance from CRISSIE after that. Oh, and then we had the white student union fiasco. That was crazy. We had some white students create a white student union on account of the black student union. And so we said, you guys are obviously connected to the Klan. And they were like,
No. We are not connected to the Klan.
In fact, if you prove that we're connected to the Klan, then we'll shut down.
So, short story is, through surveillance, we had a statewide network, and one of our operatives at the University of Central Florida actually tipped us off. And we got a copy of a document that proved without a shadow of a doubt that they were connected to the KKK. So, I told the U.S. president, you got 48 hours to shut down, or I'm sending this document to the newspaper. And he thought I was bluffing. So, we sent the document to the paper, and they got exposed as being a direct arm of the KKK, and that shut them up. The advisor quit after that, and that was the end of the white student union.
Did you follow the football team also?
Well, actually, at that time, I made money betting against the Gators. Well, it was easy to get a bet. Like I said, I hung with everyone in town, and they were Gator fanatics.
Yeah.
Now, I figured out from following them that during that time, the games they were supposed to win, they ended up losing. The game they were supposed to lose, some kind of way, they pull an upset. I lost some money, but I won more than I lost.
Okay. So when did you decide you were a Gator? When did you say, I am a Gator?
2005.
2005. And you graduated which year?
74.
74? Well, what happened in 2005 that made you change?
I don't know.
Well, what was the moment? What was going on? What happened in 2005 that made you decide you wanted to be a Gator?
Like I said, when I first came up here, it wasn't too welcoming to black students.
Right.
Now, even though I graduated, I really didn't feel a part of the school because of some things that had happened. I just said, yeah, I went to the University of Florida, and that was it.
Well, what would you offer to current students? What would you tell them?
I would tell you to set your goals, achieve your goals, study hard, and get back to the community. Encourage others, especially black males, that education is the key to your future.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, just that I had some good times here. I had some bad times here. I made some friendships that are still going on. When I think of it, can't believe it's been almost 40 years. I'm glad I'm here. Woo, the alternative is a whole lot worse.
Okay, thanks.
UF is very different, and we've made some major steps from where we were in the early 1970s to where we are today. I think we have a long way to go, but something that I've learned to appreciate and understand is that the University of Florida will never be a carbon copy of Florida A&M. This is a predominantly white institution, and it's going to be a predominantly white institution. We'll have a few people of color on campus. I think we have about 2,500 here now. It might be 5,000. It may be 10 at the most, but it's going to take a major effort. Many people want to go where they feel they are a major part of it, so they're going to predominantly black institutions. I'm doing this interview with you now because I think our history is significant. And I know it's changed. And I think we're seeing more people that want to be a part of it because it's not what it was. I was surprised this year when I talked to 10 people who worked in the library, but found that they weren't graduates of the library program, and hopefully that will change in the future. And we'll have more people who graduated from the University of Florida who can find jobs here that are not just skilled jobs, but are professional jobs.
What do you think needs to happen to get those numbers to go from 2,500 to 5,000?
I think recruitment has to be improved, but I think it's going to take a special kind of student to come here and see that they can be successful. And I think the more programs we have, that will happen. and I just think it's going to take more effort than it's been. At one point, it was a major effort, then it became sort of minor, but I think we're going to see a cycle turn around, and it's going to improve in the future. There are more black students here than when I was here, and there are less now than there were, but they're from different cultures, and I think at one point I heard there were more people from the islands, but I think things are going to change when word is out that the University of Florida is not a hostile campus.
Contrasted with what you see on campus right now with your experience, what has been the value of diversity and integration at the University of Florida?
Well, I think it's twofold at least. One, it certainly has opened up opportunities for black students to matriculate at Florida's flagship university, the best in the state as far as I'm concerned. Second, it has exposed white students to black students, realizing that there are varying cultures in this country. So I think it benefits both. I see students now, well, not just students, but I was telling a fella earlier today that as I would ride around Gainesville during the elections, I probably saw more Obama and Biden stickers on white folks' cars than black folks' cars, young and old. And I'm going, boy, this is a long way from where I come from. Then I went to the inauguration in Washington with my children because I wanted them to see it. And I bet you, there were probably 60% whites in that crowd. And people were hugging, crying, cheering, and embracing. And that to me, that was just something I never thought I'd live to see in my lifetime, ever. Having grown up in Florida in the 50s and the 60s, So I was telling the fellow before the elections, it will never happen. It just won't happen. So when it did happen, I was fully emotional about it. And that's when I said to my children, we're going to Washington.
Well, all those people are going to be there.
I didn't care how much people were going to be there. Your daddy's going to be there, and I want you there because you don't know how far black folks come in this country. So the next night when we got home, my daughter called me on the phone. She lives in Orlando.
Why were you so emotional?
I don't expect you to understand.
What was all the hoopla about?
You were there. You saw it. You saw history in the making in this country. There'll never be another first.
Well, you know, he was the most qualified.
Everybody knew that, but not everybody voted for him. I mean, most people knew he was the more qualified. Can you just imagine Sarah Palin as vice president of these United States and McCain gets ill? I mean, I'd probably have to leave the country. But anyways, back to you, Evelyn. You have history. As I walk and drive around campus now, I'm just elated at the progress that's been made. When I first graduated, the only thing I wanted to do was get away from a bad experience. But as I matured and got older and realized the value of the education I got, there's no question in my mind that my degrees from the University of Florida have aided me throughout my career. And that's the first question they asked me.
Oh, where did you go to school?
University of Florida Law School.
Oh, well, you're probably all right.
It was that kind of response to it. So I called upon fellow classmates when I was seeking judicial appointments, and they wrote letters and made calls on my behalf. So there's no question in my mind that the friendships I established, at least in law school, have helped me throughout my career. No, I've seen the judicial system change. I see young black lawyers now coming out and going to work for big law firms. When I graduated, there was no white firms hiring black lawyers. I mean, you could go to work for legal services or a public defender's office or legal aid or something. But now, these youngsters coming out, well, the sky's the limit. And if they've got the grade and the determination, well, the sky is the limit.
where the girls are the fairest, the boys are the